All right. Welcome back to the Health Revival Show. We have Dr. Andrea McBeth. She is a human ecosystem activist, entrepreneur, and naturopathic clinician who has been teaching and innovating in the microbiome space since 2015. So she is the founder and CEO of Thana Health. She developed a breakthrough fecal derived postbiotic platform and leads the company's scientific, strategic, and fundraising efforts. So I'm really excited to have you here today and talk a little bit about this very specialized postbiotic. And I won't jack up any of these terminology. I'll let you provide all of that to our listeners as to what exactly this does in the body. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up here starting this company and running this company?
Yeah, I think I love that you are on Instagram as the poop. You know, poop is important, and I kind of colloquially get known as the poop queen too. But I, uh, well before that, was a scientist and just really a nerd. Right? I love microbiology. I traditionally was working in molecular biology and biomedical engineering. Um, I was partway through a PhD. I had been in science since my high school chemistry internship, but decided to leave conventional academia when my sister was diagnosed with the same kind of cancer I was studying, which was a trip. So she had at 23 a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a T cell type lymphoma leukemia, and I had been studying T cell cancer leukemia at the time. And I think that's important because I do fundamentally consider myself a scientist, even though I'm not, I didn't finish my PhD. I took care of her full time for 2 years inpatient and jumped to the other side of the fence and was really lucky to have incredible mentors and support. She survived and has been in remission for almost over 12 years now, which is wild. But that experience sort of taught me that one, I didn't really want to do that again. And two, there's so much power beyond the basic science and support we can offer people when they're suffering. And so, because I lived in the hospital with her and did a lot of co care, I kind of wanted to go be a chef or a nutritionist and became a naturopath because that was there and really feel like we can empower people through food as medicine and support people suffering with tools that the conventional system doesn't have, and kind of in that process of being really passionate about helping people as a naturopathic kind of GI focused and autoimmune focused doc, I learned about fecal transplant, which is fascinating. And then I'll maybe come back and define that later. But in that process, decided to put my science hat back on and visit with some old friends. And we got really lucky and we're at the right place at the right time, and made a breakthrough looking at these signaling molecules that healthy people's microbiomes make, which we now call postbiotics. And we brought that to market so that everyone can have access to the healthy ecosystem of a vaginally born, breastfed, never been sick, never had antibiotics and lives in the Colorado mountains, because that's not what my microbiome looks like. I was a C-section baby and had a bunch of medications and was chronically ill. So, um, yeah, I love it. I get to do some science. I do some CEO hat. I do some naturopathic kind of wellness. And I am really honored to be here. I love your guys' podcast. And I loved your SIBO podcast. I was like, oh, we get to talk about science. They're into it. So thanks for having me today.
Yeah, of course. All right. I have a question, and this is not part of the show, but how hard is it to find this individual to give you the poop, the shit?
Yeah.
Because how many people have the meet that criteria? I'm sure it's a very, very small percentage of the population, especially coming through the past 5 years.
Yeah. I think we got lucky being naturopaths in Portland to define health in like 2015, 2016. And, we have 7 donors. It's taken us many years. We've screened thousands of people. Um, there's always changing information. Um, we still don't have a clear definition of health, but it's like the best we can do. We joke about like, well, can we just have people go live at like a retreat and then they're healthy, or like, I can we have them take pictures of their fridge? I care a lot about ultra processed food and the quality of nutrition, but you can't control certain things. So we do the best we can. These people are very special. I think also just because of time, we've learned that this is a good cohort. We've been testing. Some of our donors have been with us for, yeah, since the beginning. So
Wow.
Gosh,
I'm
okay.
fascinated by this.
No, I mean, I am too, and I think from a person listening, like a Gen Pop listening to this podcast, I would love to take a step back and explain what fecal transplants are because Liz and I know what they are. And I know that that is not technically your product, but from what I understand, the product was trying to get like close to the benefit, obviously, of what a fecal transplant can provide. But fecal transplants are also thousands of dollars. And so I would love to hear from your, explanation. What are fecal transplants? Who typically gets them? What is the definition of health that you create, or that maybe people that provide fecal transplants try and create around who is providing them? Because essentially, you are consuming someone else's poop in a pill. Like that, at the very basic of it, that is what is happening. And the goal is that by consuming that, you are restructuring your internal microbiome to be in a healthier place. I actually have one of my aunts had a fecal transplant, and it worked until it didn't because there were other issues going on. Right. So I would love to hear your science breakdown of it and kind of all the dirty details. No pun intended.
yeah, I'd love demystifying, right? Because we think about the ick factor and
All right, if you're dealing with water retention, you're waking up puffy, your ankles or your wrists are really swollen, or you can't get your rings off, and maybe you're even dragging throughout the day, no matter how much water you drink, there's actually a good chance that you're not actually hydrating properly.
Exactly, because water alone is not enough. You need electrolytes, you need sodium, potassium, magnesium, because those things actually pull water into your cells. Otherwise, you're basically just flushing it out and wondering why you're still tired, you're still bloated, and you're still sluggish.
But here's the thing, most electrolyte supplements out there aren't helping you in any way because a lot of them contain things like natural flavors, food dyes, and maltodextrin, which can irritate your gut. And these things can also spike your blood sugar when you're trying to heal.
That's why we both started using Buoy. It's super simple, just trace minerals and electrolytes in liquid form. No flavors, no colors, no sugar, no sweeteners, and you squeeze it into whatever you are drinking: water, coffee, tea, smoothies, you name it.
And it's clinically backed by science too. So studies have shown that Buoy helps you hydrate better, 64% better in fact, and that's data coming from key blood and urinary markers, not just marketing fluff. And honestly, you can feel the difference. I've had many clients tell me their digestion's improved, they have less headaches, and they're better energy throughout the day.
And Buoy isn't just for people that go to the gym all the time and sweat a bunch. They actually offer a 35% lifetime discount for anyone that's struggling with chronic illnesses. Things like POTS, Hashimoto's, Crohn's disease, chronic migraines, and every autoimmune condition. They're really committed to making better hydration accessible to people who need it most.
I actually throw it in my coffee every morning because it's such an easy upgrade. You don't even taste it, but you're definitely gonna notice if you miss it.
If you're tired of playing hydration roulette and want something that actually supports your body, you've got to try Buoy. It's honestly one of the simplest ways to feel better faster.
poop is scary and disease, but actually manure has been used in farming since the beginning of time. Fecal transplants actually been around since fourth Chinese literature. It's standard of care in veterinary medicine. It is literally giving the healthy stool of a healthy person to a recipient, whether that's oral or via colonoscopy. And it was rediscovered in the 1950s in the US, but then in the 2000s brought back to the US from an Australian microbiologist specifically for an antibiotic resistant GI bug called C. diff or Clostridium difficile. And many things, right? We know antibiotic resistance is a thing that's happening in our current era. We think of MRSA and scary things that you can get in the hospital. Well, C. diff is one of those that specifically causes diarrhea, and all the antibiotics sometimes just don't work anymore. And so it turns out you can take a healthy person, right? Even just like a spouse or an aunt and uncle's person's poop that isn't acutely sick, and give that to somebody with C. diff, and they 80 to 90% of time will just be cured. It's so cool. And I was really lucky enough to kind of work in the early days of that. But The caveat is it has infectious disease risk. And so what we did is we sterilized that by putting it in an autoclave, which is essentially like a medical grade pressure cooker. And we kill all the bacteria and all the viruses and all the risk, but maintain that mixture of nutrients, kind of like if you were going to take healthy fertilizer from what was originally manure. And that's a very similar kind of analogy, but it's all of the good nutrients that comes from a healthy ecosystem. So fecal transplants used in the US and was reintroduced. And then it turned out fecal transplant was used for a whole bunch of things, including clinical research looking at autism and Parkinson's disease and liver and all kinds of really interesting stuff, responding to cancer therapy and things like that. But it's hard to regulate and standardize something as complex as stool, right? We can't make synthetic blood and have been trying for a long time. Similarly, poop, we just don't know very much. Like we know almost nothing. We only discovered the microbiome like 20 years ago, through sequencing. So I think where we're at is the cool part about fecal transplant was like this revolution of understanding that the gut matters and is connected to the brain and our immune system and our metabolic system. We are really at the infancy of understanding, and we just took a step towards simplifying and saying, okay, bacteria probably have their role and like probiotics, all that stuff. But what if we took the safer step and just like made it a little bit more, maybe less oomph, less risk, and brought healthy poop to people in a form of the postbiotic so that we could meet people in that level? Because we all know everybody's got dysbiosis in this world to some extent. I mean, some people more than others, but it's just nice to have a toolbox. And I hope it inspires a whole new generation of us thinking about the gut microbiome, but we're like just at the beginning. And honestly, I didn't know it was going to work. It was just kind of I guess. So,
A strange experiment.
What are some of your markers of success, right? So are you just looking at symptom improvement for the person and the individual, or were you doing stool testing before and after to really look at the effectiveness of how this was helping shift the microbiome?
yeah, that's a really good question. So, very at the very beginning, we said, okay, well, what's in it? And we had to do some analysis through metabolomics to look at the small molecules because there's a lot of metabolites or postbiotics we don't know what they are, but there's a few key ones like butyrate we wanted to see. And so that we confirmed is in the end product, and that was part of our original design, but it's in very small concentrations. And so the next theory was, okay, so if we give butyrate and these mixture of 14,000 small molecules to patients who have a GI infection or dysbiosis, do they feel better? Does their diarrhea or constipation or motility or whatever improve? And we track that anecdotally. We've not run a big clinical study on that, but we've been using this for enough years as a provider based and now direct to consumer supplement. We feel confident, at least anecdotally, that it can improve people's digestion broadly. And when we looked at microbiome sequencing in a small cohort at the very beginning, the data was just, it was like, well, does it improve diversity? Because what are we looking at in whole genome sequencing? A bunch of different species? Like, what does that even mean? And so, my early scientist who helped me with a lot of the science that I love dearly, he was like, he was mad at me because he was like, I can't make any statistically significant statements
Yeah.
about an N of 10. That's the most preposterous thing you've ever said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, but all
Well,
these people feel better. Like, are they roughly going in the right direction? Well, yeah, but I'm not going to like, we can't, it's not relevant because the cohort's too small. And so we've sort of wrestled with this for many years of what is the biomarker we want to be looking at. And honestly, I like am ready to invent my own test because I just don't think we have a good definition, consensus of what I am yet to find something that I'm going to like put my flag in the sand and say, like, yes, obviously, if somebody has SIBO and their methane gets better, that's helpful. But And we can look at fecal calprotectin, for example, in Crohn's and colitis, which is an
Mm,
inflammatory marker.
right.
But broadly, in the context of a supplement that's like loosely for wellness, and we're looking at dysbiosis, even diversity is a rough metric for us. We have now clinical data tracking app that if we can get a cohort of like 100 or a couple hundred people that every day find that their bowel habits improve, that's probably my best hope for good quality pre and post data. Do I think this would impact any of those other metrics? Probably, but I have not collected or paid for in a scientifically rigorous way that analysis yet. We've really focused on safety.
Okay. So I guess for me, thinking about, this being a postbiotic, many cases that I have, because I work a lot with inflammatory bowel. Let's just put it that way. It's autoimmune of the gut because we just have so much stuff going on now, right?
Mhm.
Whether or not it's SIBO, it's H. pylori, it's parasites, whatever. I see a lot of, really high MM9 markers, lactoferrin. We're looking at obviously the calprotectin and some of those other markers. But then I also see on the flip side, very low secretory IgA, or we're looking at lactate or acetate or butyrate levels that some are normal and some are very low, but
Yeah.
that person is very sensitive because even as we bring in postbiotics that can create gas or bloating, kind of a reaction as this kind of takes resident in the microbiome. So looking at this, right, this is pretty cool because we have amino acids, those short chain fatty acids, but you're saying in small amounts. You've got the bile acids in here as well. So tell us, like, who's the ideal person for this? Stool testing or not, right? We're
Yeah.
looking at dysbiotic motility either direction, in either too slow or too fast of transit, or I guess that would be just for the person
Yeah.
listening, like, how do they know if this is right for them?
Yeah. I know some of your other podcasts, you get really nerdy. So, with
Yeah.
your permission, can I deep dive a little bit into a dysbiosis hypothesis? Okay.
Yes.
Reel me in if it
Yeah.
needs to be
Oh, you're
reeled
fine.
in.
And
But
listeners, we'll promise we'll bring it back to actionable steps for you, but we got to geek out on the science here a little bit.
so there is a new body of work coming out um, from some scientists at Andreas Baumier and Sebastian Winters at UC Davis. And they are looking at oxidative stress. So we hear oxidative stress in mitochondria and aging, and we're familiar with this concept that like you have too much oxidative stress, you don't have enough antioxidants, it causes your mitochondria to get sad and you age and your cells age and stuff. And that's true on our skin and kind of in the aging space. But imagine that that's also happening in the like climate of the mixture in the microbiome. So the microbes are very sensitive to the kind of environment that they're going to be metabolizing in. And because the colon is this like, I think about our colon and our microbiome as like the bottom of the ocean extremophile environment. It's no oxygen, it's very particular. And these non-oxygen anaerobe bacteria have a very specific kind of metabolism they like to do that's slow, but they can do it without oxygen and they make things like butyrate and short chain fatty acids and they convert our fiber into the things we need to be healthy. What happens in oxidative stress? We get constipated, our vagus nerve gets screwed up, we eat antibiotics or preservatives in food, or something happens and that environment has oxygen flood into it. You get oxidative stress. There's a feedback with NO, and the metabolism of those bugs change, and the facultative anaerobes. There's some that can switch the way that they're metabolizing, and then there's some that like will bloom just as aerobic bugs. And that process is probably at the heart of what we think of as like dysbiosis in chronic gut stuff, whether it's Crohn's and colitis or IBS or SIBO or arthritis flares or whatever. There's some component of a pocket of oxidative stress. And it turns out that our microbiome is like our antioxidant control buffer for that process. And if it's not working or you don't have enough precursors from polyphenols or fruits and vegetables, there's a lot of reasons. You can't sort of quell that fire. And I really love this early work that's being done because leaky gut and dysbiosis is something we've always been like thinking about and throwing around, but the underlying mechanism is a little confusing because people can turn on and off, right? They can be in really bad shape and like the next day be fine, or they can kind of stay at like a slow burn, chronically ill for decades. And what we are working with and what we think of and where Thanabiotic seems to help people is when they're really in an oxidative stress. The product itself is a super antioxidant based on preclinical work we did. It like will protect a model from being poisoned by paraquat, which is an herbicide that causes oxidative stress, like orders of magnitude better than vitamin C. And actually, it actually works better than rapamycin and resveratrol at protecting these little worms' health span. And so what we think and what we're starting to frame all the tools, the herbs, the supplements, everything we think been thinking about. Patrick Hanaway is our scientific advisor. He's an MD from like IFM. And him and I have been working on sort of doing reviews of what's coming out in basic science and applying it to functional GI and thinking about, oh, that totally makes sense. You take herbs or motility agents or something to combat this oxidative stress micro pocket environment. And then you can shift the microbes back, and then you can start to produce those short chain fatty acids in the concentrations you need. Or your microbes will they turn on the genes that line our gut to turn on the antioxidant response gene. So it's a very like elegant, and maybe this is a big thing to dive into here, but there's just, it's a cool way to frame dysbiosis. And honestly, I think that's why we can be at a conference and give somebody a pack of 7 of our, it's only 100 milligrams of frozen or freeze dried, autoclaved, it's shelf stable. So it's just room temp, but it's not a lot of stuff. And people will come back the next day and be like, I had the best wipe optional poop of my life. What the heck was in that? And I'm just like, I think you just needed that reequilibration. It's different than just fiber. It's different than just an antimicrobial. It's kind of got a little bit of everything, but it works best if you're in that oxidative stress. Because honestly, some of our healthier people come and they say, really didn't do anything for me, or it kind of made my farts a little stinky. And you're like, okay, well, that's maybe not the right person for this. It maybe is for people who have that chronic oxidative stress environment. And the cool part is you can use it acutely or sort of once a day as needed for long term support. That was a lot. I hope that's not too much.
No,
We
that
can
was
just
helpful.
chill and
And I
reverse
mean,
a little bit.
I guess from a listener perspective, the next question I would imagine would be, okay, is there a time where it does help, but I may have symptoms? So like you mentioned, and I've seen that too with people where we put in a butyrate, we put in a short chain fatty acid, some type of postbiotic, and they do end up more gassy. They do end up, and I think sometimes they are put in too soon, and or that person maybe doesn't need them. Maybe their microbiome is sufficient in terms of the short chain fatty acids being produced. And so, just to dive one step deeper on that, is there a time where maybe someone is having a symptom, but it is still needed in that case, and maybe the timing is wrong there? Or what do you see with, or should people completely be like positive symptoms once starting it?
I, over time, have come to when I'm talking to providers and new people introducing to this, I do say, use this when you go on a bender, use this when you eat pizza or cheese or are exposed to family stress. Use it as a starting point when you are more likely to notice a difference. That said, I think we are all our own experiment. And the coolest part about microbiome science is that we very much now are starting to understand how unique my microbiome lived experiences from yours, right? Like rice is going to do something very different to my blood sugar than you, perhaps. And that's mediated by my microbiome. Same thing when how I'm going to respond to a psych med or a meditative practice or whatever you name it. So I think, I'm a chronically ill human. I had JRA as a kid and Guillain-Barré. So I was like totally paralyzed and learned to walk again. And I've been in and out of the hospital most of my life. rheumatology and things and I have chronic pain, I am there's no wrong answers for me as a sick human. And I want all the tools and I want to know what the cost benefit is of all of them. And I want to know I have power to feel in charge of my own body, right? Like the agency and safety of knowing I have tools is really important. So this is a tool that may work for some people. And I really feel like it's important to remind people that like no matter what the blogs say or their conventional doc about, a disease being a one-way street or whatever it is, like you are your own science experiment. And so give it a shot and listen to your body. It's hard sometimes to listen to your body, but that's part of the reason we have a clinical data tracking app that like lets you track your anxiety and your brain fog and your sleep and things like that. Because, I have people that have tried this and they swear they're going to use it for the rest of their life to prevent disease, right? But I don't have data on that. And I think, great, I'm glad I have that tool. But I think, in my cost benefit experience, it's better to have, um, as many tools as you want and be empowered to individually use them. Sorry, that was a long rant, but I get kind of soapboxy about that.
No. No, I think that was a good rant, and I think that it takes into account what we talk about all the time in terms of bio-individuality, and there's never a template, there's never a one size fits all, um, with, yeah, any case, and sometimes there is experimentation, sometimes there is a thought that it is going to work and it doesn't. Um, so also for the listeners, can you just briefly, because we're talking about postbiotics, just explain pre, pro, post, and what each of them ultimately purpose, when you utilize them, why we need all of them.
Yeah. So a postbiotic, sorry about that, my
No, it's okay.
puppy. Um, so a post, we all know what a probiotic is. We'll start there, right? Like a probiotic is a bacteria that either, gives us a health benefit. We take it orally from a fermented food or a supplement, or I kind of think about our good guys in our gut as probiotics, the live bacteria. The thing that they eat that we feed them is the prebiotic. That's how I define a prebiotic. There are technical definitions, but I think it's just easier to say there's a live bug, that's the probiotic. Its food is the prebiotic. So vegetables, fiber, sometimes the mucus we eat, it eats inside our gut. And then the thing that the bug makes from eating that prebiotic is the postbiotic or metabolite small molecules. You can also just call a heat killed probiotic a postbiotic, and I think they're used interchangeably, but these are marketing terms. And I think that's a really important distinction. This is not a scientific definition, it's a definition for marketing of supplements. And so there isn't consensus. And I think it's easiest to think of it as the food, the bug itself, and the poop that the bug makes when it eats the food. And that's really what the postbiotic is. It's a small molecule like butyrate or a bile acid. It's something that's been metabolically changed from a precursor molecule to something new from the bug in the gut or in a sauerkraut.
So, for the person who is chronically ill, where would you recommend that they start? Like, how quickly are you seeing people notice change? I know you mentioned,
Yeah.
almost didn't have to wipe or whatever, but I know on your website you've got a few options there. And the person might say, hey, before I invest a few $100s, I want to try that
Mhm.
7-day pack to really know, is this maybe right for me or something that's beneficial? And what would be some of the indicators that you would be looking at? I'm assuming, obviously bio individuality here, but you would be thinking
Yeah. Your bowel
motility.
habits should improve in 24 hours. You
Okay.
should have a better poop the next day or the next few days.
My question would be around bloating. Like I mentioned before, when we're introducing things to the gut, sometimes there can be this, what I call just adjustment period, right? As things are taking
Mhm.
precedence, whether that's probiotics that you're then feeding with maybe some prebiotics, or again, you're putting in straight short chain fatty acids or butyrate or whatever that might be. So is that the same here that, hey, we might expect a 7 to 10 day period or a 3 to 5 day period of an adjustment, or would they not? Would they have
Not
less trouble
generally.
getting some of those effects?
Yeah. What in my experience is like doing kind of functional GI and working in SIBO, you know, one of my favorite tools is berberine. I really love rhizinate and coated peppermint. I use SIBO herbs like antimicrobials.
Sure.
I find the antibiotic to be gentler than all of those, at least less likely to have kind of die off for adjustment periods.
Okay.
Occasionally we get that reported, but we've been tracking adverse events and having pretty close conversations with providers now since 2021. So I feel anecdotally confident that it is pretty well tolerated. It's actually, more likely that if something happens that's annoying is that it doesn't do anything. And so a 7 cap pack is a good place to start if you are hesitant to invest. The only other thing I would say is if you are interested, we have a complete money back guarantee on the 30 cap bottle. And so that's probably a better place to start for most people if you can afford to purchase upfront a bottle that's $200. That's why we made the 7 cap packs, was to make it more accessible for somebody to give it a try. I do think if you take 1 cap for 7 days or 1 cap for 3 days and then 2 caps, you should have a sense of whether or not it's going to shift your bowel habits. Other kind of downstream inflammation is a little bit more nuanced, and that might take a few weeks to notice.
Sure.
Is
Yeah.
that
We're not going to
not too
heal
vague?
chronic. Yeah. No, we're not going to heal chronic issues with a 7 day, you know, capsule.
But you'll
One.
find out if you tolerate it, and I
Sure.
think that's important. And I think the reason we have the 7 cap pack is mostly for people to try it and make sure they tolerate it, and then give the 30 cap bottle a try to see if it's going to have a net benefit. And at the end of a month,
Sure.
I really think it's important to make this accessible. So like, just fill out the form and we'll
Yeah.
give you your money back, and don't feel bad. It's like always the people who should be doing that are afraid to do it. And I'm like, just that's why we're here. I want to make this last long, be accessible. So just ask for your money back.
My other follow-up question here would be outside of motility, we know a lot of individuals struggle with anxiety and some that they feel paralyzed, it's like it's just heart racing and there's no reason for it. They're just sitting there in a calm state with their family or friends and there's nothing to be anxious about, but they feel this tense anxiousness in their body. Do you have any data or anecdotal data from this app? And maybe you guys just launched it, so it's too soon to know to see, hey, we are seeing that individuals are improving with some of this, anxiety or mood related symptoms.
We are looking to collect that data, and we are definitely interested in it because there is like non, you know, non-scientifically reported.
If you feel tired all the time and you're drinking water, you're probably missing electrolytes because you need electrolytes to get intracellularly hydrated. We love Buoy because this is an easy way to get in sodium, potassium, magnesium, and trace minerals into your day without any of the junk fillers that most powders use.
That's feedback we're getting. And so we are hoping to collect that data. And, I think about anxiety is really interesting, right? Because there's different kinds when you talk to patients. There's like when you have diarrhea or an IBS flare, everything's just kind of on 11. And maybe you do have a baseline of 7, but that difference is what makes you feel yucky. And the gut like brain connection is that's not what I expected us to get feedback on, to be honest. Like I really thought it would be good for diarrhea. And that's what I was expecting. And so when people kept coming back and saying, this is helping my brain, it was in parallel with sort of the early research coming out about the gut brain inflammatory kind of feedback loop. But neurologists were just not here for that. And it's now slowly starting to get, we didn't even know we had neuronal cells in our gut until like 10 years ago. And so our gut is playing a huge component of that piece sometimes. Sometimes it isn't our gut, but I think there is a component where there's enough people with like pretty bad angry guts out there that are contributing to that sense of whatever, that it is a place where I'm hopeful we're going to start to unwind and hopefully help empower people to feel not at 11, when they don't want to be.
Yeah. So to branch off from anxiety, obviously, we know, and like we just discussed, how much mood can be impacted. But what about things like the immune system, metabolism? We've actually, I think, in previous podcasts, we've talked about research that shows the fecal transport of diabetic mice and how
Mhm.
much it changed, And so I would love for you to kind of branch into other areas of our health in terms of immunological health and metabolic health and how much the microbiome and, the fecal transportation and change can affect that for people.
Yeah, I love continuous blood glucose monitors. I think they're fascinating. And one of the things I would love to see as they become more accessible in the US outside of people that are diabetic is that we start to use them to understand all the supplements we're taking, because that is the best metric of understanding how our metabolism is being impacted by our diet, our lifestyle, and the things we're taking, right? So if you can take a supplement and those spikes for kind of equivalent days of stress and food are improving, that is a study I'm hoping that we can eventually get funding for. Because I do think the root of many of our chronic diseases is not that we're all diabetic, although there are a lot of people that are diabetic, but even healthy people with normal hemoglobin A1Cs, we have a much more like intense roller coaster we're on with our blood sugar spiking and decreasing. And the slope of that line is actually where a lot of the damage and inflammation is coming from, because we're not grazing on 40 to 100 grams of fiber throughout the day. We're eating a Western diet, and we're like crash eating as we're getting our kids out the door, doing our meetings, or, collectively people, right? And so I am hopeful that Thanabiotic, amongst many things, and honestly, I love what Pendulum Health has done with acromancy in their research. Like, they have shown the role that bugs can have in metabolic impact and blood sugar. And I think that's going to be true more and more as the average person can start to track what different diet stuff is doing. And that, even if you're not overtly diabetic, is causing damage and at the crux of even hormone dysregulation, which you guys talk all about a lot, right? Like, cortisol and estrogen dysregulation has a root in our just like inability to control our blood sugar spiking at a baseline. And so I am really excited about that too. And I think this is potentially a powerful tool for people to look at foods that are they should be healthy eating, but for some reason are spiking their blood sugar. And that's like a hypothesis I have, but encourage people to try it. On the immune system side, I I don't have as good of like a metric, right? Or a readout.
Yes.
So anything we can do to do the redox component of this to reduce inflammation. And I actually think, what we're really missing as a culture is what Tregs. And I don't know if people know what T regulatory cells are, but they're like, I think of them as like the librarian. They're like these magical T cells that tell everybody to calm down. It's going to be okay. Like, don't light the thing on fire. And we're just all kind of missing those because those are made by metabolites or postbiotics from healthy microbes that are eating fiber. And we are just fiber deficient in a baseline.
Yeah.
So those
So
are the two places.
so many people think that fiber is the problem. Like, in terms of, I can't eat fire. I remember one of my cases, and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
she's fantastic, but she came in and she's a competitor, physique competitor, and she's like, I'm chronically constipated, but I can't eat more than 14 grams of fiber. I tracked it. If I do, it makes my constipation worse. By the time she left the program, she was eating like 45 grams of fiber a day, pooping every day, feeling great. I'm like, it's
Great.
not fiber that's the issue. It's maybe insufficiencies of microbes to help us break down right? Or signal, as you mentioned before, a lot of these microbes, they signal different microbes to produce short chain fatty acids, to signal the intestinal mucosa to down inflammation and, the tight junctions and all of these things that it's very complex. But to the layman person out there, honestly, yeah, there are some cases, I believe, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. There are some cases where people don't tolerate a lot of fiber, and we got to go really slow, or we got to really think
Mhm.
about the types and the specific, you know, foods with that. But I think more often than not, it's the person that is just eating so much processed food or frankenfibers, right? Like I think back to the time that I was dieting and I had to hit my protein, so I would eat Quest bars full of artificial fibers, and I would blow up. My belly was like a balloon and I had gas. And lo and behold, you're thinking like, I can't tolerate fiber because that bar has so much fiber in it. I can't do the fiber one bars. That's completely different acting in my body than eating some real one ingredient whole food fibers. So I'd love your opinion on that too, because I think so many people have this misconception that they can't tolerate fibers, but really it's the type of fiber and maybe other things, coming in with it as well. But
Yeah. I wish, because I worked in SIBO, I get it. People don't feel good when they eat fiber, when they have IBS that, is all a mess. And there was a really cool work done out of Stanford, a research paper, big study that was done and published a couple summers ago called the FIFO food study or something like that. And it looked at, they were trying to get people to increase fiber. And then they also did a sub cohort of fermented foods. And when they broke down, what happened was if somebody came into the fiber group with a low diversity, they ate 40 grams of fiber, they had more inflammation. And if they came into the group with high diversity and they ate a bunch of fiber, they had less inflammation. And if they just ate a little bit of fermented foods, it kind of didn't matter. They got better. And my takeaway from them, the researchers talking about the study and looking at it, and my experience with patients who don't tolerate fiber is that you have to rebuild the ecosystem before you throw a bunch of prebiotics into an environment that can't it's it's in the oxidative stress. It doesn't have that anaerobic metabolism to do anything with it. And where I think we have to start, and where you probably do with your program, we intuitively do, is with polyphenols, berry powders. Like, you're not going to give people a bunch of inulin or a Quest bar or a ton of psyllium, right? Or even if, if they're histamine, not for a bunch of fermented foods, but you have to like very incrementally induce tolerance through prebiotic, like polyphenol diversity. And if Thanabiotic can do anything for people, it would be like my quest to empower people to try to be eating fiber the way they're trying to eat protein. Like, if we put even a fraction of the energy that we do to eating protein, to eating fiber healthy, right?
yeah,
Incremental, we would be net. I mean, I'm staying with friends, and the 6-year-old that I'm living with, her mom is a naturopath and brilliant doc, and we're like brainstorming how to talk her into eating fiber and vegetables. And so we started tracking, can you get 30 plants a week? And honestly, she's going to do it tonight. We're making coconut for dinner and it's going to be her 30th plant. And I am so impressed that a 6-year-old can eat 30 plants a week, which means a picky 6-year-old who would prefer noodles with butter, if she can do it, anybody can do it.
yeah. I think it takes, a lot of effort on the parents' part too. And then I love the game.
Totally. And privilege,
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
gamifying it and really making it fun. Like I wrote a kids constipation cure and I've got all kinds of stuff in there, but the number one thing is you have to make this fun because if you come in stressed out, your kid's going to feel that, they're going to resist it. It's going to turn into an argument and the parent's going to quit and give up, right? So how do we make it this exciting thing of how we get to nourish our body and we get to try different foods and it's okay if we don't like it, right? But at the end of the day, this is something that can really help us. We always talk in our house about like being strong, get faster. My son's very into sports and things like that. So I love that. And yeah, if a 6-year-old can do it and be willing to do it, then whoever's listening to this podcast that says I could never do that, I have texture issues or I have these issues or whatever, you could do it too. Just start with one bite. right? Like something very simple. And so that kind of brings us to I'd love to shift and talk about actionable steps people can take in their lifestyle, right? We think it's amazing that we have these tools in our toolbox and supplements that can be really helpful. But truly, when we're thinking about health and healing, we have to think about the biggest inputs, right? So we talk a lot on our podcast water quality, air quality, obviously food quality, because those are all the things that you're putting into your body and then surrounding your body, obviously, whatever you're putting on your personal skincare, hair care, nail care, things like that. Try to be low tox and whatnot as well. But what would you say are some of the most important aspects that you work on with some of your patients in regards to things beyond supplements?
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And I don't see patients anymore, but when I was teaching microbiome nutrition, I did the same thing. I started with air quality, water quality, vagus nerve tone, and food, right? And I think everybody has like we think about personality tests and you're like an INTP or an ENFJ or whatever they are.
Mhm.
Everybody has their like pillars and they do really well. I eat beautiful food. I care a lot about food and I eat beautiful food. And I am the CEO of a startup and have insomnia and like my stress management is terrible.
We're all human.
And
We're there.
and I can like bike ride and move my body and I have like community I love, right? Or whatever. And then I have water filter and things like that. So I think everybody's got to do their own little environmental personal assessment and then like see where the gains are. Mine is 100% trauma therapy, boundary setting, nervous system repatterning, like not anything related to the stuff we're talking today. That is what's going to help my microbiome the most because that's motility. But for me personally, that's different than probably many of your patients where the nutrition piece is where the low hanging fruit is, right? I do get 100 plants a week, not just 30. We were joking because I was just like, are you going to play? And we're like, no, you and your dad are going to play. We are in college, so we don't have to participate.
Oh my goodness. Yeah,
So I
and
think that's, like the same thing you guys say. Sorry, go ahead.
no, that's great, and I think that it doesn't have to be complex or confusing. It's not always easy, but the basic things still are what matter. And although extremely powerful like things like this and this postbiotic exist, it is not going to fix you forever and ever. It is a tool alongside the other tools that need to be implemented, right? And
Yeah.
I can't, you know, although water is great, if you only have a bucket of water and you have an entire house fire, like there are other things that you need to use to get that house fire out, right? And the water can help and it can be super powerful, but not in the presence of so much other dysfunction that is not being addressed. So this is amazing. Would love for you to let our listeners know where they can find out more information about the product. If you have anything going on right now, I know you mentioned within the app and the launch of the app, there's things that are happening that people need to know about. So give us all the dirty details and information on where they can find more information on this.
Yeah. So the company is Thana, Thaena, like a Greek goddess, and a bacteria, right? Uh, Thana.com is the website. And our goal is a small, we invented this, we patented it, we manufacture it, we kind of do everything ourselves, is to provide information. And so go to our website. There's educational material, there's microbiome education. If you have questions, just ask us. We do have the Chloe app on the website, and at checkout, you can download the clinical tracking app. And if you collect data, even just partly for a month, you'll get a 30% off discount for any bottle after that. And so the exchange is monetary, but also we really appreciate people tracking and we hope that there's value add for you. You own your data, it's decent, you opt in and consent in and you can see how you're doing and if you had to poop every day. Um, We also have a provider program because we originally only sold through providers. And so if people are a health coach, a nutritionist, naturopath, anybody with a licensed um, ability to instruct patients and provide supplements, there's a whole nother set of resources, like 30 hours of continuing ed on our website. We do a monthly webinar with providers, and we do a bunch of stuff that is very much oriented towards teaching the teacher on the website. And so check that out. Ask us if people have questions. I want to be transparent and really honest that this is new. We don't have good, like robust RCTs that cost millions of dollars, but we have anecdotal data and built off really good preclinical and work done in fecal transplant. And I feel really confident about the safety, and that this could be a good tool in people's toolbox in the right context. So I don't want to magic. I don't want to promise a magic bullet. It really is a poop pill that like may just be the thing that gets you going on vacation or rescues the family from, whatever in Mexico. And maybe that's enough.
Them. Yeah, I was just looking on the website. If you are listening to this, go to their website. They've got a lot of information on here, and you can even watch like a 20-minute video from the doctor kind of explaining this. And, maybe you are somebody who has tried it all. I would certainly say in a lot of the cases that I work before we go to a fecal transplant, like a real fecal transplant, this would be something certainly to try. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge today. I think a lot of what you shared here makes sense, right? We geeked a little bit on the science side, but also gave a lot of things that people can do and consider in terms of action as well. So we'll link everything in the show notes. And as you guys listen to this, there were a few times that she was saying the name of the postbiotic. It kind of sounded like antibiotic. I just want to be clear. She was talking about the product the whole time. No antibiotics here.
Oh, I know. We call it thanibiotic, which
Yes.
is confusing.
Yeah, I was like, "Ooh,
Sorry.
it's okay." Just because I think that, depending upon the listener, we're so in tune to hearing antibiotic, antibiotic, antibiotic. It's like,
Right.
oh, those things destroy your microbiome. So, yeah, really cool. Excited to be able to share this with our audience. And thank you for joining the show today.